Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Setting Up Your Company for Success in South Carolina. I'm Bob Quinn, Executive Director of the South Carolina Research Authority, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. Just to let you know that today's session will be recorded and provided to all registrants later today. If you have any questions or comments, I'd urge you to use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be entertaining those questions throughout the presentation. We are blessed today to have two superb executives as our panelists. First is Heather Simmons-Jones. Heather leads the MRB Group's local government services team in South Carolina, supporting clients in organizational development, human resources, best practices, and economic development. She has over 20 years of economic development and local government experience as Chief Executive Officer, Director, and Local Government Administrator. She has served as President of the South Carolina Economic Developers Association, and we are also honored to have Heather as a member of our Board of Trustees. A native of South Carolina, Heather grew up in South Carolina's Low Country. She holds both bachelor's and master's degrees from Clemson University and is a certified economic developer in South Carolina. She has announced over $2 billion in capital investments within the state of South Carolina. Our other panelist is Allison Slack, who is a Senior Economic Development Analyst with the MRB Group. Allison is an economic development thought leader, analyst, project manager, and grants writer. She has served a wide range of constituents in both strategic and tactical economic development programming. As a state economic development executive, Allison developed and implemented entrepreneurial support programs and innovation-driven economic development initiatives. She has supported her projects and clients through application development and management at nearly $50 million in successful grant applications. Allison is originally from Charleston, South Carolina. Heather, Allison, take it away.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning. And thank you to each of you that took time out of your day and your week this busy holiday season to join us for the webinar today. As Bob said, I have the distinct pleasure of serving as a trustee for the SCRA, and I can't think of a better organization to be associated with. So having the opportunity to present today has special meaning for me personally. We wanted to start this morning with just a quick overview of the company, MRB Group. If any of you did a Google search or just looked us up prior to today's event, you probably saw that we are historically an engineering and architecture firm. So just to dispel any questions or concerns about why an engineering and architectural firm would be addressing startup and setting your business up for success, just a quick second of historical perspective. We are a 100-year-old engineering and architectural firm. We're headquartered in Rochester, New York, and you will also see the other offices that we have within New York State. Some 5 years ago, we expanded into Texas through acquisition, and so now we have 3 offices within our Texas market. Earlier this year, we expanded into South Carolina. I sit in the Charleston office, and this office serves the Southeast. About 10 years ago, MRB Group's president and CEO realized that engineering and architectural firms aren't necessarily unique, but we felt like a differentiator and a value add for our clients would be to add these trusted advisory services. And so what you see here on the screen, in addition to those technical resources that we provide to our clients, is the 2 boxes on the right that demonstrate the SmarterLocalGov brand which is an initiative of municipal services. So if you think of anything that happens in a town hall or a county administration office, that is kind of embodied within that SmarterLocalGov initiative. So that could be economic development, that could be site location, GIS mapping, data research, grants administration, grants research, municipal operations, and really just about anything else that you can envision happening in the four walls of a county building. Next slide. So for these types of services, I'm going to highlight the four of us that likely would be working within the South Carolina ecosystem here. You've already heard about myself and about Allison. I would add that our two co-workers and colleagues, Matt Horn and Michael Indolo, round out our key team members. Matt and I actually were in Beaufort County at the same time when I was serving as economic development lead. He was assistant city manager for the town of Beaufort, for the city. Michael Indolo has served his entire adult career as a consultant on the private sector side. And he has national clients and has been doing that work for a number of years. So together, the four of us are also supported by about 12 other team members scattered throughout our offices around the nation. And collectively, we make up the SmarterLocalGov team that supports not only municipalities, but companies as they grow and expand. Moving into kind of our innovation expertise around the ecosystem of research and innovation. Again, just to kind of highlight, we do have former practitioners, former local governors, that would be great, former local government officials and economic development officials that have worked hand in hand within the South Carolina network. And through that process, we have learned both what state agencies and what nonprofit organizations look like, who their key team members are, what their interests are, and how they fit into kind of the rubric of solving for X for our companies. So we've really been able through those relationships to grow expertise around incentives, around permitting, around ways to accelerate companies and their success in South Carolina.
Thanks. I'm going to add to this slide. This is Allison, that in our traditional economic development service lines, so strategic planning, market analysis, impact analysis, and so forth, we're known for bringing a lens of tech-led development, entrepreneur-driven growth and job creation style economic development strategy. So we're a go-to resource for government agencies and organizations looking to design and implement programs that support the success of startups locally and really just help folks optimize the conditions for innovation in their communities. And a lot of that work is designed to support next generation manufacturing practices and to help companies be competitive by leveraging emerging technologies. And I'll talk a little bit more about the sources, the data resources we use to do so in a little bit. But before we continue on, we wanted to learn a little bit more about you. So we asked Kelsey to help us set up a couple poll questions we hope you'll answer for us. The first being, what best describes your role in economic development? Hopefully one of these 5 categories makes some sense to you, and I believe it's set up so you can choose multiple if you have a few roles or a hybrid role.
Bob, do we have Jeopardy, Final Jeopardy music in the background?
Yeah, right.
Well, it'd be interesting if we did, because every night my dog sings along to the Final Jeopardy music. So we would have accompaniment if so.
Well, I think that would be a nice treat in addition to the webinars, especially this holiday season, if we had Pup doing the singing.
Okay, great. Lots of startup companies on the call, and overall an interesting ecosystem mix and this will help us lead into our support our next question, which is, what industry are you in? And if you're not a company, if you're more of a support organization, what industry are you most interested in or most associated with? And again, I believe you can select multiple. Okay, lots of software and digital technologies. Fantastic, and a fair amount of life sciences, which I know is a big focused area for SCRA. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, certainly that helps us both guide the conversation and know where the interests are. Also allows us to really just understand what kinds of follow-up internally we need to provide, and then what we can do to assist those of you on the call. All right, so moving into how we can help early stage companies. Doug Conant, who was the former CEO of the Campbell Soup Company, was once said, to win the marketplace, you must first win the workplace. And I've kind of always liked that, that quote, because really it doesn't matter what industry you just answered you're in. We all know that people are the central and core focus of the success of any company or organization. And one of the things that I most enjoy helping companies and organizations with is really around those HR components, right? So oftentimes when I've traveled internationally, we've heard from a company that says, we're just looking to bring one salesperson into your state, and we need to understand what that infrastructure looks like. How do we find that salesperson? What is our point of entry? What kind of incorporation and licensure do we need? And so, we're very attuned to those kinds of needs from the international companies, but also from the domestic companies that we work with. And so in terms of building your team, often it is helpful to have someone take that saddling, if you will, of expectation to find the right person off of the company's leadership, helping them get the right person in the right seat, looking at job descriptions, looking at policies, kind of overseeing strengths and weaknesses of the organization and where key hires would fit in. And so in terms of building your team, retaining your team, really elevating the value proposition of your organization to those candidates, that's an area that we certainly can help and do help companies as well as municipalities with. Going through that again, board creation, bylaws, policy, just general good health and best practices when it comes to setting up a company for success. Something that I particularly enjoy, and I know that Allison does as well, is really the creation of strong public-private partnerships. So whether that's an incubator or an accelerator, that's an economic development corporation or some other type of partnership, we have a lot of strength in putting those kinds of organizations together and guiding that process.
And as an extension of that, one of my favorite ways personally to help startup companies and early stage ventures is in connecting them with the right partners to especially help with technical challenges, whether it's to improve their processes, adopt new technology, innovate new products, redesign products in an optimal way so they can be manufactured at scale, or to help a company scale up their physical operations as they grow. So we really work at the intersection of the startup community and resources like manufacturing extension partnership centers, university R&D centers that might have the right equipment or scientific expertise to be a valuable partner, and other technical resources. We can also assist with market research. I'll talk a bit about that in a moment, but wanted to mention also I've worked with the I-Core program quite a bit, which is one of the best ways for startups to do their customer discovery, and something that many folks on this call are probably aware that the NSF and now other federal agencies are increasingly requiring, for example, their SBI awardees to go through. So the methodology of that is so important to helping early stage ventures make sure they understand what their real market and application might be, and to pivot when they need to pivot. And we are very familiar with the funding landscape, again, for startups in a variety of industries, and can assist with identifying and pursuing grants.
So as we move from those startup elements into growth and scale up, a few ways that we have been successful in helping companies is through the site selection and navigation process. And so really here, it's, we know who you need to know, right? Through our years of expertise and working in South Carolina, with local governments, with state governments, with agencies, we've kind of established the relationships for your point of entry in each of those organizations, and know how to help you get the introduction and kind of frame for you the applicable conversation from your business plan and how it fits in with the resources and with the opportunities for each of those entities. We like to work with local governments, helping communities and companies connect around key issues like permitting and zoning, infrastructure improvements, but also on the incentive process and the development review process. So our team has a lot of experience in, again, the site location components, but also really understanding what communities have at their discretion that can benefit the process and can benefit the companies in locating and setting up shop in that respective community. Looking at the financial impacts of a location decision, again, going back to that expertise and those years of experience, we've gained a keen knowledge of the impacts of local tax and fee structures and how they relate to projects. We also understand the applicable licensure and the approvals required to take a business plan into implementation. Our team internally has done a vast amount of feasibility studies, cost benefit analysis, and other financial impact modeling that supports the site selection process and supports really helping a company determine that their business plan can be implementable in a particular state and or in a particular community. And in that vein, I mean, you can have a great business plan and you can have a wonderful location in which to land and grow, but more often than not, there is a funding source need and or requirement in order to complete the plan and be successful. And so our team, again, helps with navigating and securing incentives for location and expansion, as well as was previously mentioned, that opportunity to research and match grant opportunities that are out there for specific needs that companies have within their life cycle. I would end this slide by just kind of going back to the importance of building a team. As you add those first few members and are recruiting professionals, there are other elements as you come into growth modes, as you add employees, as you go from a 2-person shop to a 12-person shop, that are important to have as consideration, whether that's federal law and guidelines that then are triggered by the number of employees you have, or employee audits to make sure that your records are appropriate and in keeping with federal guidelines, to employee surveys, knowing what your employees think of the organization and what they value and what's important to them. I remember an example years ago where we did an employee satisfaction survey, and the company that we were doing that for was really very focused on their benefits plan, but it was a very young workforce that they employed, and the benefit thought process had not resonated at such a high level as it had with the more tenured employees. And so it was kind of an eye-opener for the company to realize that all this money and this value proposition that they were placing within the benefits package wasn't having the same zest and zeal for the millennials as it was for some of their more tenured employees. So having those kinds of answers and knowing that is certainly important for companies as well. As is culture, right? If you don't plan for culture, you get what you get. And sometimes that's not what you want. And so really the analysis of culture, the creation of culture, the instilling of certain pieces of that, we enjoy helping with. And one of my favorite things is really the idea of high performing teams. Again, making sure that you have the right people in the right seats and that you are supporting your professionals in such a way that they can advance themselves and that they can perform at the highest level that they're capable of. So those are all extremely important elements of building your team.
And on this last item with company matchmaking, we just wanted to share that from time to time, we do help companies with things like supplier development, technology scouting, identifying companies that might make good partners, either upstream or downstream, identifying companies that are looking for acquisition and merger opportunities that might be relevant. And our research in that area is often in collaboration with a state economic development agency, local manufacturing extension partnerships, and so forth. And relatedly, we've done quite a bit of work recently on the topic of supply chain localization as industries have struggled in recognizing their vulnerability to supply chain complexity in the wake of the pandemic. So there's kind of new energy into that topic. We've worked with the New York State Economic Development Agency to provide them with recommendations on ways to encourage supply chain localization. And we look forward to doing more of that because we think it will continue to be very, very relevant.
Can I interject a question in that regard? So what are some of the broader recommendations that you have made regarding that, and particularly those that might be applicable in South Carolina?
Sure. We think there's a real need for more practitioners, spread around a given state, potentially in the MEP system, who can sit down with companies and thoroughly analyze their total cost of ownership of their current supply chain models. We've often found that companies will look at the price of an input from an overseas supplier, and that price point is alone not sufficient to account for quality issues, potential supply chain bottlenecks, like we've seen so much of in the past 2 years and so forth. So from an organization and like state support standpoint, we think there's room to upskill more advisors to local manufacturers on how to take a harder look at their total cost of ownership and explore other models that, while they might include higher price per widget, really make a company more sustainable through challenges like we just saw. There are organizations that do that, but to make that more accessible to smaller companies, especially smaller hardware companies, could, I think, go a long way toward encouraging onshoring, supply chain localization, and greater resilience across the manufacturing sector. If that was a good enough answer for you, Bob, I'll move on to. I wanted to share something about our data resources. We base all of our recommendations on solid market realities, and that means we subscribe to the best data providers. I'll focus here on MZ. If you're not familiar with MZ, Economic Modeling Specialists International, a key tool for us in projecting industry growth by location, understanding workforce patterns and talent pools, understanding supply chain dynamics. It's also the tool we use to model economic impacts of jobs you may be creating in your community, including the multiplier effects that ripple throughout the economy. We have a wealth of real estate data for commercial and industrial real estate. And for market research, IBIS World is one of our key tools for understanding industry trends and dynamics at the 5-digit NAICS level, which is a fairly specific level of industry. So we do pride ourselves on our data tools and like to bring those to bear on all of our planning.
Excuse me, Allison, a follow-on question to your last answer to my question. That is, so you're looking at supply chain from a risk management lens?
Yes, risk management, and I mean, ultimately cost management, right? Essentially applying a lens of what is the true cost of relying on complex, especially overseas suppliers, vis-a-vis looking for developing a local supplier, a domestic supplier. And in addition to that, we have worked around some recommendations regarding use of new technologies to make production of some things more feasible stateside that may have shifted overseas and that we can't be directly cost competitive with in doing things the old way. So there's some exciting opportunities that way where we can leverage newer production methods to potentially make onshore production more cost effective than it would be otherwise, or than it used to be vis-a-vis our competitors overseas.
Thank you.
Sure.
We just wanted to kind of mention a couple of examples where we have worked at the intersection of the private sector and the public sector in helping communities be successful in their recruitment and retention efforts by setting companies up for success within those respective communities. One example that we are currently engaged with is the Southern Carolina landing pad in Beaufort County, South Carolina. This is a South Carolina Department of Commerce designated landing pad, and it is in cooperation with both their regional alliance as well as the county and city. You know, that particular entity is looking at to MRB Group for everything from advisement on getting started, location decisions, incentives, hiring and organizational decisions, as well as technical resources like design, figuring out what sort of building might fit on a particular site, what site makes the most sense, and those sorts of things. So we are glad to be designated as a partner with them. And one of the things I would just mention for my years of experience traveling again and working abroad is that these are great locations, as we know, for small companies and small international companies to land and have an ecosystem surrounding them to help them be supported and to take away some of the anxieties about landing in the US and trying to know all the elements of things that even for someone who's been here and been doing it for several decades still finds the complexities within. So that's been a really nice partnership for us, and we just wanted to highlight as an active project in which we're working in that intersection.
And actually, by coincidence, we have a call at 1 or 2 o'clock with Danny Black, the head of that alliance, to talk about partnerships. So nice coincidence.
I love it. I love it. Hey, right? The more we can partner together and have concerted efforts, the stronger our ecosystem will be. So that's great. So by way of other examples, we have been successfully involved in the creation, assessment, implementation of several innovation districts. 2 of those that I particularly had a hand in. One was the Greenwood, South Carolina Innovation District. In this particular example, we applied for and received 2 different EDA grants, federally designated grants. One was to look at the land use elements of the Greenwood Genetics Center and the surrounding park of property around it, as well as look at the economic development infrastructure and opportunity for the creation of an innovation district. The success of that was precipitated largely by Greenwood having the Greenwood Genetics Center as well as Self Regional Hospital and a large offering of other medical, life sciences, and innovative related industries and companies, and that ecosystem surrounding that area. The second really was the Bluffton Tech Park. And when I was in Beaufort County as Economic Development Director, we worked with the landowner in Bluffton to create a land development unit, and we worked with the county and the town to do some tax increment financing, and then created the Bluffton Tech Park as a location or a place for CareCore National, who was the first company that went into there. Then also worked with Clemson University to create the Don Ryan Center for Innovation. And since that time, the town has put their offices there, and there have been other retail and other small businesses that have joined, including recently Technical College of the Low Country recently built a building there within that park. So just another example of creating technology infrastructure and innovation districts in South Carolina. And I know Allison has some examples as well.
Yeah, this Newton Needham, two towns just outside Boston, a very sort of dense suburb area of Boston, was one innovation district, the planning exercise I was involved in. And then one of my favorite projects was actually a non-traditional case of an innovation district, which you usually think of as a dense urban environment, but this was several towns across New York's very rural southern tier. And I highlight it just to say that this is part of our philosophy of, whatever your geography and your community looks like, we can help you evaluate what pieces are missing from your innovation infrastructure that can really make a difference in investing in. So to go with that puzzle pieces theme, looking at what are the sources of R&D that are nearby, what are your existing entrepreneurial support organizations, what kind of infrastructure is really needed to attract and retain talent, and to create the kinds of collisions that are the characteristic environment for successful innovation. I'm going to talk just for a moment about a client of ours, FuseHub. It's a nonprofit organization that supports tech-led growth and commercialization and the competitiveness of the manufacturing sector. They are in specific to New York State, but I highlight them to say that we are experienced in helping develop programs that are based on global best practices, like the innovation voucher concept we've extended across FuseHub's programs. We've helped them get funding from the Department of Commerce, Department of Defense, and Department of Energy to do those things and to scale them, as they've been able to show some pretty impressive metrics in terms of the outcome of the assistance that the programs provide to startup companies and early stage ventures. So I know today our audience is not completely the FuseHubs of the world, but just to say that, again, we operate on both sides of the table, and that helps us help private sector folks navigate resources and position themselves to take advantage of resources like this. At the top there, that's a publication we authored for FuseHub last year on 5 emerging industry clusters, the kinds of tech convergence that are impacting different manufacturing industries, and how smaller companies in particular can tap into resources to maximize their opportunity. We've already talked a little bit about economic impact and incentives. We frequently do this kind of work to help communicate that the value that's being brought by an economic development project, often as part of making the case for what public incentives might be appropriate to help make a project more feasible. In New York State, we just developed a cost benefit analysis tool that gives the local bodies in New York State, the framework they need to conduct the simple CBAs or impact studies, as they might need to do as they go along. But we also do these studies across the country and at different scales and complexity, to help companies and communities draw conclusions about economic development projects from sound research and modeling.
And one of my favorite projects that I had the opportunity to work on in my public sector career was the recruitment and expansion of Teijin, which is a carbon fiber company located in Japan. We successfully located their $660 million phase one project in Greenwood County. My primary responsibilities during that recruitment process were to work with the Department of Commerce, the Rural Infrastructure Authority, the Council of Governments within our region, in writing some economic development administration grants. We worked not only on the incentive side, but also to get money for federally supported infrastructure improvements. We also helped the company with their quest and desire to be designated as a foreign trade zone. And then, the things that aren't as flashy, but things that are equally as important when moving a multinational company into a small community are answers around housing and transportation and quality of life and healthcare resources that speak the language of the employees that will be moving there. So just by way of example, the experience we have in helping companies really with the large lift like incentives and infrastructure, but also with the smaller lifts that are extremely top of mind for employees as they are considering a move into South Carolina that impact not only themselves directly, but their family as they're moving into a state that they're unfamiliar with. And so our team has great experience in that hand-holding process for small and large companies.
So at the risk of putting you all on the spot, the new Commerce Secretary, Harry Lightsey, has almost from day one, or actually even during his testimony for being supported by the Senate, approved by the Senate, has stressed the need for incentive programs for companies like those that are on the call here, that software companies and other tech-focused companies, and certainly working with him and his staff towards that goal. What can we learn from other states in terms of their incentive programs to focus more in those industries as compared to recruiting in the Teijins of the world?
Allison, you want to take that one since you've worked more out of South Carolina than I?
So if I understand the question is sort of trends in industry attraction toolkits from state to state.
Attraction and retention.
Yeah.
And let's focus on, say, those that are focused more on the software industry.
Sure. I mean, just quality workforce seems to, rise to the top of almost every conversation, and is increasingly a focus of different state efforts to create the conditions for more successful attraction and retention. I think it's reflected in the RFPs, large and small, whether it's Amazon shopping for a second headquarters or a smaller, even smaller logistics and warehousing operations. The talent equation is so important. So I think a lot of states on the back end are investing in, for example, in New York, in significant workforce development initiatives, ensuring that they're employer-led and industry-led, so that they result in the kinds of outcomes that can support long-term attraction and retention.
I think also, just Bob, I think what we see in South Carolina at least is after such a great run of manufacturing recruitment and expansion within South Carolina, some people got a little deaf, if you will, to the smaller companies, the technology-based companies, and the differentiation between a Teijin that's going to invest 660 million and hire hundreds of people versus a small 10 or 12 shop tech company or life sciences company that's going to pay, you know, $80,000, $120,000 for each of those persons. And so I think that for the state of South Carolina, we have to be cognizant of the fact that if we say we want tech-led growth and we say we want life science companies and small business startups and entrepreneurs to really find their place in South Carolina, we have to think about retooling our incentive plans and our incentive programs so that the thresholds that we look at for manufacturing for a Teijin are not exclusive of what, you know, might be applicable for a 10 or 20 person technology company. And so I think Secretary Lightsey is going to look at incentives and look at the cooperative partnerships between organizations like SCRA and SCBio, his own organization, Commerce, and others to really say, all right, we got to walk the talk if we want to be successful in recruiting and retaining these companies here. And so I know that's not a direct answer to give you an example of what another state's doing, but just to say that the retooling has to take into account a separate set of metrics by which we judge incentives for companies in South Carolina.
Thank you. And just FYI, we've been working with SCBio on a package of incentives focused on the life sciences industry and actually amending the existing Life Sciences Act, which is 20 years old and wasn't particularly broad thinking even 20 years ago. So the question came in, does MRB provide industry/sector reports such as revenue, value, volume, history, trends, and growth?
Yes, we can and have. We're not at our core a market research firm, but as I mentioned earlier, we subscribe to market research firm data tools. So we have some core data that can address all of those items in that question, and we would typically blend that information with taking a look at other data through MZ and so forth to understand like the local conditions, not just the nationwide market trends for a particular industry, but also consider that in the context of what's going on in a particular region.
Yeah.
Any other questions right now before we move into our last slide?
Not at this time.
Thank you. I'll just add that the questioner for that question would be pleased to share an example of having done that in the past that's publicly accessible.
All right, next slide.
Okay, this is our final content slide here. Just a couple other examples of us helping to further develop the entrepreneurial support ecosystem in a couple of communities. On the left here was a town in Texas where we did an incubator feasibility study, and I wanted to highlight it just because we've developed a pretty rich experience set in agricultural and food innovations systems. So that's been a fun area as there's so much sort of excitement and programming around those concepts. And again, just the better entrepreneurial infrastructure a community has or a state has, the better we can help support companies' success in those places.
All right, I think we have one more poll. So your last question, your final Jeopardy responses are due in the next 6 months. I may have a need for, and these would be any and all choices that you want to check here. We should have had one at the bottom that just said all of the above and just checked everything. As you're answering the question, I'll just keep moving into kind of, our closing. And that is, MRB Group is a very diverse company. And so where we really see value that we can offer to those of you on the call today, it ranges, it's from the design aspects, it's from the planning aspects, it's from your site location considerations, it's incentive negotiation, helping with market analysis. So there's a very broad reach that we can help each of you on the call with. And at the end of the day, we just want to be a resource for your company. We have the luxury of having a lot of flexibility on the kinds of projects that we work on. And so I would say, looking at this, you've got 80% of you say that there's a need for grant funding. I mean, that is music to our ears, because that's such a strong area where we can really help match those funding resources with company needs. And, I would encourage, obviously, my contact information's there. We can provide Allison's as well. But, just send us a note and say, this is what we're struggling with. This is what we're trying to get to. This is an issue that we'd love 5 minutes of your time, an hour of your time, just to kind of walk through with us and give us some general guidance. That's how our relationships start with a lot of companies. It's just offering some advisement and some guidance to get you headed in the right direction. And then through that, we want to develop a relationship where we're a partner with you, regardless of what those needs might be. So again, right here in South Carolina, a large infrastructure of people to support you throughout the United States. So, if you have multiple different locations that you're working in or you're considering, certainly reach out to us. It may be something we can, easily do a couple of clicks or pull a study or something for you immediately. And so just give us that opportunity to be responsive and to be your partner as you grow and expand. Are there any other questions?
Not from the participants. I have one, again, at the risk of putting you on the spot. Let's talk about your assistance on grants. Would your fee structure be upfront, success-based, or some combination?
You want to take that one, Allison?
Sure. They are upfront rather than success-based. And typically we would, put quite a bit of thought into what we think the level of effort would be required on our part, and work with a client to determine, what pieces of it they are really looking for external assistance with versus taking it all on versus, if they have materials they put together before for similar funders kind of thing. So to really, tailor it to what the actual need is, and to help us come up with a cost estimate. And we can, at that point, structure an agreement that might be just as we go, hourly, or a not to exceed, something like that.
Thank you. I do not see any other questions at this time. So obviously, your presentation was comprehensive.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. Allison and I both appreciate each of you that joined us today, and hope that you got some glimmer of information that you didn't know or you didn't have before. But certainly if we can offer more detail, or there's something that you answered on the last poll question that you need immediate help with, we'd love to have that initial conversation with you to see how we can assist. And of course, we we do wish you all happy holidays and look forward to a very productive and exciting 2022.
Well, thank you, Heather and Allison, and thank you all for your time. And just as a reminder, you will receive a copy of this recording later today. All the best for happy holidays and happy and prosperous New Year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.